welcome Ray Kowalchuk and Tobias Leenaert. For those of you, if you want to bring those on screen, welcome. To those of you just joining us, thank you for being at the Vegan Convergence of the People number 21, How to Create a Vegan World. Tobias Leenaert will be interviewed by Ray Kowalchuk. Now, Ray has a 20-year career as a video editor. He's a certified climate healer. He's a volunteer with VCOP. He's always thought-provoking, and we love him. And we love you too, Tobias Leenaert, the author of How to Create a Vegan World, a Pragmatic Approach. He blogs at www.veganstrategist.org. He gives talks and trainings around the world. He's also co-founder of ProVeg International, and he's used to thinking out of the box and building bridges between different groups and practicing what he calls slow opinion. How to create a world. Please welcome Tobias Leenaert and Ray Kowalchuk.
Hi, Tobias. It's great to meet you in person, kind of. We're virtually
sort of in person. Hi, Ray, and thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me here.
Yes, thanks, BJ. I'm a very big fan of your book. I've read it twice. I just reread it recently, and I should say that I listened to it on Audible, and I highly recommend that for people to play it in the car. My son was going to college, and we played it in the car as we're going back and forth. And it's a short book, but it was a source of a lot of inspiration and debate, because the subtitle of it, How to Create a Vegan World, a Pragmatic Approach. And pragmatism is something that is just such a, could be a touchy topic between vegans who are defending that faith of veganism and defining and viciously defending that definition. I call that philosophizing, and I wear that hat quite frequently, but I take that hat off when it comes time to do outreach. And that requires a degree of pragmatism. It's less about talking and more about listening, and I appreciate that expression in your book. And you're kind of associated with this word pragmatism. Were you always pragmatic?
Well, maybe just explain very briefly what I mean with it. So pragmatism is about doing what works in the context of the times, of the audience, of whatever you have in front of you, of your resources, and I oppose it to idealism in a narrow sense. So we're all idealists in a broad sense, but in a narrow sense, idealism is about asking for whatever you want and wanting it now, and wanting other people to have the same motivations that you have, and also having a set of rules that you try to answer to and that you try to follow. And pragmatism doesn't care about the rules, it just cares about results and impact. And no, I wasn't always a pragmatist. I was, when I started as a vegan, when I was about 21 years old or something, I was not very pragmatic, and I'm still very passionate, but back then there was mostly passion and not so much rationality, I would say. I remember there was, for instance, a hunting fair where I was protesting together with other people from an animal rights group, and I was shouting my lungs out, and I was shouting murderers, 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 and it was very fun. And that's the problem, that it's fun. That kind of like activism where you do not take into account what the results are, but you just look at what you feel like, what your truth is, what you want to express, no matter what. That sort of activism is quite fun to do. It's quite fun to vent yourself and to express your rage and your anger. It brings relief. It has good sides, but it doesn't depart from the audience. And pragmatism is about this, departing from the audience, looking what your audience needs, what it's ready for, rather than saying, this is what I want to bring, this is my truth, this is what I need to say. So that is a fundamental difference between those approaches.
Yeah, I should mention that there's an anti-vivisection march happening in Toronto right now, which, I'd kind of like to be that and be doing this, but I had to choose one. And as I mentioned, I take off that hat of being a vegan for vegans and engaging in the outreach, and the rules all change. You are a co-founder of ProVeg, and something in my second reading of the book didn't really click in the first time was the meaning of that, the choice of those words, pro and veg. Can you talk a little bit about why it's called ProVeg?
Yeah, so organization that I'm affiliated with is ProVeg, and we have about 300 people in 250, 300 people in 15 countries working towards a plant-based world. And I think two aspects of the name ProVeg that are important here is one, it's pro, it's not anti. It's saying what we want to move towards. Two, it's expressing the alternative. It's not saying so much what is bad and what is wrong, but it's focusing on the good. So that is one aspect. Sometimes that can be a matter of personal psychology and preference. Other people like to focus on what's going wrong, and that's also useful. But we chose in our case to focus on the positive. And veg is almost deliberately ambiguous. It can mean vegetables, it can be vegan, it can mean vegetarian. And this is another part of the idealism. Idealistic vegans would want us to always say vegan. Let's be clear about that. Let's just talk about what we want to achieve. But pragmatically, one would say, look, if we see from evidence that the word vegan is not always the best word, not always the word that sits well with people, then we might as well choose another word, or then we should choose another word that is more palatable for people. And this is not about pleasing people. This is really about having the best possible effect for the animals and for the planet. So you see the aspect of pragmatism already in the name, I would say.
Yeah, thanks for that. I looked up the definition of pragmatism and the etymology. Pragmatikos in Greek means relating to fact, and you saw Dr. Rao's presentation earlier in facts and science, and engaging a world of people who think that we're very practical and rational, but we see a lot of irrationality in the world, and so coming face to face with reality, and vegans are often told you have to face the reality of animal use and abuse. That's just the way it is. But you've been vegan for decades. How has the world changed? Do you see a change now that makes you feel that pragmatism, the bar of that, how we evaluate that word, does it change?
Um, yeah. So first, if you ask me how the world has changed in that time, so I've been vegan for about 26 years. I'm 51 now. The benefit of being a bit older, it has many downsides, but one of the benefits is that you can look back from further, and you have a broader view. And people who are, for instance, 20 or whatever, and they've been vegan for a year, they might say, "Oh, it's going down. It's worse today than it was last year, and we had some opening in 2 years ago before COVID or whatever, or COVID is 5 years, Quinamita." But if you look back from further, if you can see the difference between now and 25 years ago, then the difference is huge. The difference is huge, not just in the consumption of products that we can choose from, but I would say the difference is especially big in terms of the fact that there's a lot of players now who are seeing the need for, I wouldn't say veganism, but for meat reduction, at least, for the reduction of animal products. And there's a lot of, especially in Europe here, a lot of governments who are really seeing that and who are asking the help of vegetarian vegan organizations to help them reach the audience, the customer, the citizens, because they have no clue about how to make them do that. So the same thing for companies, for retailers, etc. There's a lot of them who see that it's going in the wrong direction and we need to reduce this consumption of animal products. So that awareness among these institutional players is, I think, one of the big things that changed. And there might be people in the audience here who are from countries where that isn't happening at all yet. It is definitely happening, like I said, in Europe, and it will happen in more and more countries. And I think we'll hit walls so that more and more of these stakeholders will see that this is not the way to go forward. So I think in many ways a lot has changed. I think that if you asked me 25 years ago if I believed there would ever be a vegan world, I would have said yes, but in my mind, that would have been science fiction, like something for the 24th century or something. And now I can actually imagine that could happen this century. It might not, of course, but it could happen this century. And so I've become, in those 25 years, even though, of course, you always wanted to go faster, I've become more hopeful.
Yeah, that's the only future that I'm interested in pursuing. So it shapes the way that you do your activism and live your lives. Uh, you, I know that ProVeg's vision is a world where everyone chooses delicious and healthy food that's good for all humans, animals, and our planet. And of course, we're climate healers, so we've got a focus on that climate angle, but definitely those other three pillars puts us very much in alignment with ProVeg: the animal ethics, the human health, environmental protection, and but the environment, says climate healers, is not interested in human rituals or opinions. Mother Nature will decide that we must change. What becomes pragmatic when our appetite signals ecological collapse?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I mean, first of all, like I always wonder, like ecological collapse and disasters, etc. It's an open question for me. Are they the best way to? Is that narrative the best way to motivate people, or can we do better with a somewhat more positive or less disastrous narrative? So that is one important aspect, and I think that, like, I still want to believe that we're gonna get out of this mess. Try to believe in human rationality and human compassion, and so I do think that I depart from the assumption that we have a future and that we're going to survive and that this is going to be an uphill battle and a long battle, perhaps. But I I do not depart from the idea that it might be all gone in 5 years or whatever. So um, I don't want to like panic people because first of all, I don't believe in that, and secondly, I don't think it's very efficient. And so I still believe in pragmatic strategies, even in that context where the future looks dire. But I do still believe there is time, and we should not. I think what I want to say here is we should not say like, look, there's no time, so everything goes, and we can do whatever, and it, just as radical as we want to be, because time is very short. I think that is shooting ourselves in the foot. So it's better to depart from the idea that like, yeah, we have the time to do this as intelligently, as smartly, as strategically, as pragmatically as possible. It doesn't mean that we can delay and we can pause and whatever. No, we have to really work really hard, but I wouldn't say that it's going to end tomorrow and therefore we have to start blowing up things and whatever, if that's an answer to your question.
Mm-hmm. And it makes me realize that I mentioned there's the vegan philosophers defending the faith and the outreach people who have to, deal with the people who aren't vegan and do more listening. Climate Healers has also got a kind of a third direction that we're trying to change systems, whether people want it or not. It doesn't really matter that much people's opinion. if our systems are going to collapse, if the price of meat is going to go up because we just recognize the environmental impact is just perverse to subsidize. It doesn't matter if people really want meat. If it's something that's perverse, then we have to stop subsidizing it. Same as the oil industry. I mean, we take a lot of parallels from the environmental movement. They want to take away their subsidies so that they don't have a viable business model. People need fossil fuels in the meantime, so the subsidies persist until they don't. And that's how you phase out fossil fuels. And I see every opportunity to do exactly the same thing with the animal agriculture industry. And it's really about people choosing what are their strengths. Dr. O was talking about the different roles that we could play as activists, and everybody needs to recognize their strengths. And I think sooner or later, everybody gets into outreach of some kind or another. So there's so much so many reasons to engage with ProVeg and the various partners that are doing outreach. The scientists who popularized the word Anthropocene helped develop the 9 planetary boundaries to find a safe living space for humanity. And of course, our culture has to recognize that it's you're saying it's a longer term than what Climate Healers is claiming. Dr.
I'm agnostic, or I mean, I know time is short, but what I'm just saying is like, let's not. I mean, my preference would be to not like fall into complete disaster mode, which is very dire and dark, and limits the options that we have in terms of communication, in terms of strategies, etc. So that's all I wanted to say. Sorry for interrupting.
Right. Yeah, no problem. That's good to clarify. I mentioned the 3 planetary, the 3 pillars of veganism, and that's health and concern for the animals and the environment. And Sailesh has suggested that there's a 4th one called faith. To have faith that humans belong on this planet. And we see so many angry vegans that say, we'll be so much better off once we all just die off. And that's their approach to solving the environment. Let's not solve it, and we'll just become part of the mass extinction in progress. Obviously, that's not going to motivate people at all, like you said. What do you think about this concept of faith as something that's an upbeat way to try to get people involved?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do believe that there's a place for us on this planet, and I mean, talk about faith. I could see this as some kind of spiritual belief, or maybe something derived from certain religions like Christianity that tells us that we have to fulfill the role of some kind of guardianship on this planet. I mean, that's one interpretation of what the Bible says. I'm not religious myself, but I do believe in the concept of humans or an advanced intelligence, which I think we can call ourselves, to be some sort of shepherd of creation. So that would be our role. And in that sense, I do think that once we get our act together, and if we stop being cruel, if we at some point can be kinder people, and if at some point we maybe also develop the technology to make it all possible, then we can actually improve the lives of all creatures that live on this planet. Because for wild animals, even making abstraction of human interference and humans making it worse for them, making abstraction of that, life in the wild is not necessarily a cakewalk. And there's a lot of suffering there too, even without humans involved. And I hope that there down the road, in the far future, we can make that better. We can make it better for them, and we can be angels for animals rather than demons. And so, yeah, I do believe that is definitely a role we can play here.
I know. So there's a great conflict even within approaching psychology, which we need in order to do outreach. We need to engage people in their mental space. And there's sociology, which is, looking at people as a whole and trying to get the herd to move in a particular direction. and you cover both in your book, and I really hope people engage with that, what you've written, and work their way through a lot of these issues. I'd like to read a little bit of from the book, because as you progress through it, you get into more of the systems. This is how we operate now. This is how we engage the world. But what is it like when those tipping points happen? Do the rules change, and how do we, like you mentioned, pragmatism is less important once the tipping points are reached.
Yeah. What I was saying at the end of the book is, so this is a time still to be pragmatic, because majority of people is not on our side, and therefore you have to be quite careful, and you have to see what sticks, etc. And maybe saying like meat is murder or whatever, or things like that is not the best idea. But I can imagine there could come a time where we can use those tactics and those messages, because a majority of people, or a large share of the people, is agreeing, and we have enough alternatives, and the norms have changed. So yeah, when the norms change, you can use other messaging, and you can use other words, and you become really much more strict, and you can become that idealist in the narrow sense, and it will be very effective. I don't think it is as yet, because there's such a big dependency on, or people think they are dependent on, using animals. There's such a big norm of yeah, eating animal products. So in this context, it is not very effective often to tell people that they're completely wrong when they see everybody else doing what they do. But that would change over time, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. There's a very strong sense of individualism, which is, of course, very important to us. But I think an oversteering of that makes us more preoccupied with our own appetite. That was I noticed that was part of the it was on the landing page of the ProVeg, that identifies appetite is something that needs to change.
Appetite for change. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the appetite thing is about is making the link with good food and tasty food, which is like a real asset that we have in this space, in this social justice movement. Great food is a solution, is great plant-based food is an alternative, and working with food is a really great strategy, I think, and sometimes makes it so that you don't need to engage in all kind of like debating and arguments and fighting if you can let the food do the talking. That is a bit the idea.
The part I wanted to read from your book is just one paragraph. I hope you don't mind if I read it aloud.
No, sure.
At some point, the system will change. When that will happen, we don't know. But when it does, it will involve a profound transformation. It won't happen only because of vegans, but because of a high number of reducers. And it won't happen because of a moral awakening, but only because of a moral awakening, but because of the sustainability and health issues related to animal products, which will increase the price. So you touched on a few of those topics, but it's great to have them all together, because we rankle a little bit when we hear, what do you mean it's not going to be vegan saving the world? We are, that the Marines going in at the first line of attack to try to take the beachfront. And sorry for the military metaphors, but we could probably also use missionary metaphors as the Church of Veganism and the faith, the faith that the world is going to change. That's kind of necessary for all these little incremental things. And then when that tipping point happens, I think one of the tipping points is that attitude of to each their own, that as we do outreach, we're trying to appeal to people. And I think the environment is going to push it in a way that is less about how people feel, and more just that we've hit a wall, that there's so many things about our existential future, and if not for us, for our children, that's going to shift us from the preoccupation with appetite.
Yeah, just in general, I think that we have to let go of how we think this revolution should unfold. And it will unfold in many different ways. I mean, if it will, there will be different motivators and different aspects at work. And if you look at the animal rights movement, people typically think that, like, if we can just convince everybody that they have to stop eating animals or animal products because animals are important, etc. That is just one. I mean, that is our or mine, my ideal and my philosophy, and I would love that to be true. But that alone, of course, is not going to create the biggest change. That is not the main thing. We will have a variety of strategies, a variety of motivations. One important thing, for instance, is like, I mean, you can think what you want about money, but things go where money goes. And if money can be made with certain products that are vegan and compassionate, that is an important driver for change, at least within this capitalist system, which we cannot easily get rid of right now. So we have to accept all these, pragmatically accept all these things, all these forces, all these drivers, all these motivations that we may not find ideal because they don't align with our values maybe always, but nevertheless, they are important in creating this big system shift.
Yeah, thanks for that. The theme of this VCOP conference is how to make big change happen, which is lifted from sociologist Damon Centola's book, Change, How to Make Big Things Happen. As the vegan strategist, you're a bit familiar with Centola, and this is,
Yes.
Again, kind of the difference between psychology and sociology. He's a sociologist. How do you see the big change happening as we go into the future and look back and say, hey, we found we liberated the animals? What were how did these big changes happen in your view or the philosophy of ProVeg?
Yeah, I mean, there's different philosophies, theories of change. I think the one that we most hope for, you and I and activists, is a sort of moral awakening, an expansion of the moral circle regarding animals towards the planet, towards the ecosystems, towards populations, that we morally awake and that we say all these things are important and we care about them. That is what we ideally would want because we want people to care. And I think that is maybe not the way that things will go. I mean, looking at people, it's certainly possible, but it's also very much in doubt, certainly now in these days when you see some things going in the wrong direction. So I think that change might happen in a different way where we develop alternatives for animal products. And these alternatives are developed for several reasons. Again, they might be developed for financial reasons. They might be developed for sustainability reasons in part. They might be developed because some people want to make money. And then once we have alternatives that are cheap enough and good enough and available enough, etc., and this could be cultivated meat, for instance, then it will be a lot more easy to expect this moral awakening. So the way you could say this is that there could be, or there should be maybe, a technological revolution that precedes the moral revolution. It is so much easier to wake up morally and to do the right thing if the right thing is easy to do, right? And you and I and other people who have been vegan for a long time, and I've been vegan for 25 years, we're people who are ready to make sacrifices, are ready to do a difficult thing, namely being vegan back then 25 years ago was quite a difficult thing, and for most people today it's still a difficult thing. You have to go out of the way, and people who are vegan today and who don't believe this, I would invite to try another change of food, another change of diet. and see how difficult it is. I'm trying right now to be a lot healthier. Oh man, it's so very hard. So diet change is in general a very difficult thing. So we have to make it easier. We have to, in a sense, you could say we have to make compassion easier. Making compassion easier means that we have to make it easier for people to feel compassion towards animals, towards the planet, and we do that by creating alternatives for them so that doing the right thing becomes an easy thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I've been vegan for just 1 decade, but I'm still wrestling with issues of appetite and the difference between veganism and plant-based. I find it very easy to commit to the vegan. I don't cheat, but with the trying to do a plant-based diet, whole food
Yeah,
plant-based, there's
whole
just
foods.
I allow
That's
myself
dark.
cheating on that.
Yeah, it's hard.
One one of the things that Damon Santola, I mean, the head blown emoji moment for me was, and he says that influencers aren't the ones that are going to create the change. And,
Hmm.
we see organizations like PETA that really rely on getting those celebrities to say the things that they want them to say. And, uh, how do you, what do you see about that? That, it's actually small groups in the network periphery that are the ones that are going to create the change. So it doesn't start with the influencers at the center of any network. It's all those people out in the fringes. And I think the
Hmm.
celebrities who have quit being vegan have really demonstrated that difficulty. I think it's even harder for them to stay vegan because of all the countervailing influences, is what Damon Santola would say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure entirely what I think of it. I think the idea of of veganism being what he calls a complex contagion, as opposed to a simple contagion. Simple contagion is like a viral video, like everybody like just clicks like and it goes viral. Very simple. But
Yeah, six
veganism is
degrees of separation that everybody's
yeah,
kind of familiar with that
right,
concept.
yeah. And veganism is maybe not even a complex contagion, but an ultra complex contagion because it's like it has so many elements. I mean, it has the whole behavior, and this diet change is difficult, but it's also like a philosophical system and ethos, and so it's quite complicated. And I like that he emphasizes this difference between simple and complex, and it's good for us to realize how complex or complicated veganism is, or making another person vegan is. So that is one really good thing to pause by. I like the idea that we need for with complex contagions we need multiple reinforcements. So what you say, you're like in a network or in a small network, small group, and there you come across different people who are vegan or who are eating less animal products, and they are every time they're reinforcing your perception or your idea that maybe this could be a good thing to do. Um, but that still, for me, leaves the question like, okay, these people in your network that are vegan, how did they end up being vegan? And I cannot avoid the impression that an influencer can be useful to that extent. I don't think influencers alone can do it, but influencers can influence other people within a network. And then if within a network you have your several people who are vegan, then it becomes easier for that idea to spread within that network. So that's my take on that.
Reading Santola's book hurt my feelings a little bit because I'm all about information campaigns, awareness campaigns,
Mm,
and information can spread virally in with the weak ties, and it's those tight networks. So the consolation was I'm involved with Climate Healers, which is a small group of people. Like what Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So that's inspiring to say that, we may not be getting the celebrities to come to our VCOPs, but we are, building that redundancy, sharing that information that
mhm.
makes us strong. That's actually the opposite of spreading virally, because you're wasting energy telling yet another person, hey, that plants have protein. And they go, yeah, I know that. But we
Yeah.
share that around, and it becomes strong. And that's the strength of when people become into our groups, then it's something that's real, it's something they can relate to. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think the one thing to take into account here is that, like, I mean, you have the information aspect and the awareness, but the big thing is that awareness doesn't necessarily need to behavior change. We all know that. We are all aware of something that we're not necessarily doing, right? I mean, maybe all listeners here are aware of the fact that they should be vegan, and they are vegan, so there's consistency there. But for instance, in my case, I'm aware that it would be good to only wear fair trade clothing, but I'm not entirely doing that. So there is a gap between the information and the awareness and the behavior on the other hand. So that's the big difficulty. I think you're trying to spread information, you're trying to raise awareness, but awareness itself is overrated, I would say, in fact. And it's overrated because it doesn't necessarily lead to behavior change. And on the other hand, and this is, I think, the most important part of my book, behavior change can happen without awareness change. And the awareness change can follow the behavior change. So we have to always take that into account, that we can, for instance, help some person eat vegan for whatever reason, and they have no idea of climate change or whatever. It's just a diet thing or whatever for them. And then all of a sudden it becomes easier to understand these other narratives and these other arguments, just because they're not defensive against it anymore, because they already know by now that they can have good vegan food. So they don't need to be defensive. So now they can listen to the arguments.
Reading your book, there was something that I remembered that I reacted really strongly to the first time I read it, and I reacted again. You said that recidivism isn't, the people who become vegan and then stop being vegan. From a sociological perspective, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not something to panic over.
Well, I mean, it would be better if we can avoid it, of course, but it's also hope giving, because when you see that, like I was just looking at a study in the Netherlands, about 7 to 8% vegetarians and vegans together. Another time, that many who have been vegetarian or vegan. So if you count those two together, you're already at 16%. So that means that, like, it would be good to focus enough on keeping vegans vegan, and to put some effort in there, and to wonder, like, what makes vegans slide back. And for instance, often it is health issues, and so it's no use for vegans to shout at them like, "Oh, you traitor," or "Oh, you everybody can be vegan, and if it doesn't work for you, you haven't tried it enough," or whatever. No, we should actually sincerely engage with people, see where the health pitfalls are, help people confront them, help them be healthy, etc., etc. So it's a bit of a wake up call for us. If there's so many people falling off the wagon, there must be something. Something quite difficult, something challenging, and we have to identify what it is, and we have to solve it. And if we can solve it, then we have already twice the number of vegans. And that is, if the tipping point is 25%, that's getting us closer and closer to that, at least in this country.
Mm-hmm. Does the vegan movement give you a hard time? Like, what is the thing that they just inherently hate about your messaging, that you're quite often saying, don't say the V word?
I would summarize my my advice as follows: be flexible, be pragmatic, do what you think works, and sometimes that can be the V word, but in some cases that might not be effective, and then do something else. So this is about being flexible and not being dogmatic, not following a certain rule that we always should talk about veganism or always should talk about the animals. So that is what I would say. And what people don't like is, some people have this idea that there is that we should always, that we can only say go vegan, otherwise it's a betrayal. Otherwise we silently allow people to eat meat on certain days or whatever. So the only morally justified thing to say is go vegan and all the rest is wrong. And that might be, you might argue for that, and there might be a case for that in a certain way. But again, my take is if that's not effective, it's not helping animals and it's not helping the planet. So always do what works. Don't just do what your set of rules or your orthodoxy says that you should do. Or what the vegan community or some kind of like small group of people who like really follow the vegan law, let's say to the letter, what they want you to say. No, just look at the animals. Veganism is not something that we do for ourselves. It's not a faith. It's not something we have to follow to the letter. It's all about the consequences of it for animals and for the planet.
Notice in your emails you have on your sign off it says I'm a slow opinionist with a link, and it's a very good set of advice, and you identify as a slow opinionist. Can you tell us more about the benefits of being a slow opinionist in a world that's become very black and white? And
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a term I coined myself, but it just means that I like to come to conclusions slowly, and maybe they're never conclusions. They're always preliminary ideas or opinions. And I think that indeed today we have a world where people have an opinion very quickly on the internet, and they fight over those opinions that they very strongly hold, but that are not really well examined. And I think it's very important to be able to say, look, I don't have an opinion on this, or I don't have an opinion on this yet. I don't have a strong opinion on this. And I find it very problematic when people force you to have an opinion. Like there are some very polarizing issues today, and I'm not going to name any because some people might be angry, but there's some polarizing issues today on which I don't have a very strong opinion because I find it extremely complicated. I can see both sides, I can understand different viewpoints, and I have to learn more before I attach myself firmly to a certain opinion. And I think that's a healthy attitude, and it allows for growth. It allows for people to change their minds. It allows for people to disagree and to differ in opinion in a civil manner, which is something that we sometimes it seems we can no longer do. We can no longer differ in opinion in a civil manner, and I think it's very important to conserve that. Like to, if you would say something completely different than me on a certain topic, it's important that you can do that, and that I don't demonize you for that, and that I don't say like, look, you're bad or you're evil for not having the same opinion on this as mine. And this goes quite far. This goes to a lot of different topics as far as I'm concerned.
Dr. Rao was talking about the tipping points that will change systems, not just tweak them, but start to bring about a rebuilding of something completely new. And we're hoping that's a plant-based, fully plant-based food system. Are there tipping points that you watch? I don't know that we always have the agency to create the turbulence to bring the change about some things like dairy. I think dairy is just going to disintegrate on its own. We're helping it along, but sometimes we just watch and just shrewdly spot the cracks in the status quo.
Yeah, there could be many tipping points or black swans, maybe very incidents or happenings, events that create a big change, and we hadn't expected them. I'm interested in AI. Maybe one aspect of that. I mean, AI may change the entire world, but one thing in this space, AI in animal language, for instance, who knows that at some point we can understand a lot more about animal communication, and we will derive from that animals are more important than we thought, and we should care about them, etc. So that could be an important thing. I think another one is the creation of cultivated meat. black swan events like more pandemics that could necessitate us to change, things like that. So these are things that we don't have all that much control over, but that could control a big part of wherever this story goes next.
Well, I think this has been a great conversation. It's been very liberating for me to see a lot of these concepts that, even though Climate Healers has a lot of very different objectives, the spirit is all in the same space, and we're looking for the same results.